weekend on the main card of UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Spivak, we have a matchup in the welterweight division pitting the king of kung fu, Muslim Salikhov, the Wushu Sanda, just ultimate version. Like, this guy is one of the best Wushu Sanda practitioners ever. He was the gold medalist at the 2008 Beijing Olympics appendage tournament that they had over there. But he really is to the nth degree of striking. He had 4 spinning finish knockout wins before he came into the UFC in a row, headlined by a Melvin Gillard win. And in the UFC, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, but 18-3 as the record. He lost his last time out against Li Jingliang. Looked great in the first round, out-grappled Li Jingliang. You're saying, Craig, did a striker out-grapple Li Jingliang? It happened.
You could win the battle and lose the war, though. And he did bite on a lot of those body jabs that Li Jingliang was able to land. And if you watch the finish of that fight, oh my goodness, it was violent.
It was. And for Andre Fialho, this is a guy that you've known and loved over with Bellator. If you're excited for Beastin' 25 out, Vadim Nemkov later on this week, you probably know about Andre Fialho. He was featured in co-main events, main card slots over with Bellator. He fought with the PFL, with LFA, with UAE Warriors. And coming into the UFC in 2021, he went 4-0 and looked absolutely amazing. Made a short notice debut earlier on this year. Lost to Michel Pereira on the main card of a pay-per-view, but made it relatively competitive. There might have been 30s, 27s out there, but he did make it competitive. He then went out and picked up 2 giant knockout wins his next 2 times out. And then his last time out took on Jake Matthews, who was final form Jake Matthews, and looked like the best version we've ever seen.
And I think we've seen a similar story play out for both these guys in the UFC up until this point. I think when they're able to strike on their terms, when they're the ones moving forward, we've seen just how effective both these guys are. But I think that they both struggle with similar versions of a fighter. Just when they get backed up, I find both guys turn into more of a single striker than a volume striker, where Fialho has great power. And what I really like I like baseball, I like Aaron Judge. What I liked out of Aaron Judge this season was he didn't try to hit home runs. He said, hey, I'm 6'8". If I just swing for average and hit the ball.
I think he spent about 2 weeks trying to hit home runs to break the Roger Maris record.
He hit .330 and almost won the Triple Crown, so I'm pretty sure my point is good. My point is, he just went for average, and if you hit the ball more times, it gives you more chances to hit a home run. When Fialho's at his best, it's when he's throwing a lot of shots, because he does have a natural power in his own hands, so when you throw a lot of shots, you just give yourself a better chance to become a knockout artist. What I didn't like in the performance against Jake Matthews was, once Matthews was able to back him up, I found he was just trying to find that one single shot a little bit more and time it. And if he's doing that against a guy like Salikhov, not to say he couldn't land that one shot, but that is going to allow Salikhov to just get into his own flow and become that unique kind of striker. The weird thing that I have in this fight, though, is we both really hyped up Muslim Salikhov fights every single time. It's always, do we put it in the fight of the night? It has been a while since we have really seen him open up with his game and become that creative and aggressive striker that we have once saw. So I think there's a version out there where if Salikhov is on his A game, really moving around well and being an aggressive striker, I think it could have success. It's just been a while since I've really seen him be dedicated to that game plan, so it's tough for me to think, wow, he's going to go back and become that.
I had to throw all of the bias out on this fight because I get very excited about Andre Fialho fights, and I've let that be known on the channel, but the same can be said for Muslim Salikhov. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this fight, but then when I try and break it down, you really got to go analytically, watch the fights, and take the numbers into account a little bit. And I know the judges don't have that, but it does play a lot into this fight. And I agree with you. For Fialho, when he's walking guys down, when he's landing that left hand, that's when he's at his best. And the thing for Fialho about his left hand is he throws it as either a jab, a left hook, or as an uppercut, and he can have tons of success when he varies that weapon. That is his best shot, and he is an orthodox fighter, so it is funny to see a guy have so much success with that lead hand versus just winging power shots with the right, which you might expect. For Fialho, though, he isn't a giant kicker. He really does kind of rely on his boxing combinations to open up.
They're good, though.
And he has a ton of power. Fialho struggles, though, when you start to enter in. You saw it when he took on Cameron Van Camp, which is kind of funny to say, and Van Camp didn't really have a great run with the UFC, but Fialho goes and opens up with a big hook. He gets countered with a Van Camp left hook, then a right, and that puts him on baby deer legs and sends him backwards. Then in the brawl, Fialho starts to land, and he ends up finishing Van Camp. Before that, the fight against Miguel Baeza, the fight starts off. Baeza lands a clean 1-2, and I'm talking clean that sends Fialho just walking back, and then he walks himself back into it. Fialho gets hit by right hands very, very often in his fights. And if you look at it from Muslim Salikhov, he kind of said, like, We haven't seen that King of Kung Fu in the UFC.
It's been a minute.
And I'd agree, like, all the spinning stuff, you see the spinning stuff, but you don't really see it land as much.
People used to get on me for having that gripe with Zabit. Like, Zabit was awesome when he was healthy, but he'd throw these crazy spinning kicks that, let's be honest, they would never land. Muslim Salikhov does that a lot in his fight.
His fight against Francisco Trinaldo, he kind of just waited and baited, and then in tight, he landed that nice flurry. He drops Trinaldo at the end of the first round, but after that, this is where I really have to go with this video. Muslim Salikhov, after round 1, doesn't really do much, and he likes to wrestle a little bit more. And we saw it against Jingliang. He wanted to wrestle quite a bit in the first round. You're 38 years old. Like, that's an energy system that I know the training that he has, the guys that he trains with, he works a lot of his wrestling. When you're the Wushu Sanda champ, you're going to have to defend some takedowns. Yeah. Now, Wushu Sanda is kickboxing with takedowns, but people are going to try and take you down. And obviously, Alex Garcia was able to kind of win out in that realm, and that was Salikhov's first UFC fight. But Salikhov, as it goes, 14 of his 18 wins are by finish. 13 of those 14 finish wins are in round number 1. So as this fight goes on, I think it favors Fialho. Now, for Fialho, we touched on it. I mean, he got chinned in his last fight against Jake Matthews, which was back in June. Salikhov got TKO'd back in July against Li Jingliang. Now, was he out completely? No, he was covering up, but referee ended it. Fialho was more finished than Salikhov
both pretty hurt.
Neither one were all that good. But for Fialho, what does he really, really struggle with? The Pereira fight, he got out volume, but he was in on super short notice. I don't really count that one that much. The fight against Jake Matthews, he got completely outstruck in every respect. But before that, it was grappling. Like the Chris Curtis fight, Gleico França over with the PFL, he really did. And even when he was with Bellator, it really was grapple-heavy attacks is where he would struggle. And Fialho's been a guy out of Black Zillions, Sanford, friggin' Hard Knocks, Killcliff FC that it is right now. And they talk about it in every broadcast. He is of the school of Henry Hooft. He really is a Hooft type of fighter because everything's tight with a lot of power, and he employs those really tactical things that you see Hooft fighters employ. So Fialho struggles with the takedown. Could Salikhov take advantage of it? Sure. If he took down Li Jingliang, he could take down Andre Fialho. For me, not even looking at the odds and the fan vote, I think Fialho wins in the second round, the third round. He picks up as this fight goes on, and it hurts me to say it.
No, I agree, because that's the thing. Could Salikhov win this fight? Yes, he could. But I'm trusting a guy who's almost 40 years old to become a fighter that he hasn't been for a number of years now. And I like the win he has over Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Is it that impressive a win, though, after you go back and watch the fight? Not at all. He didn't have some Max Griffin knock him down, drag him out war with Elizeu. They stood there and looked at each other for 15 minutes and didn't throw a damn thing. Let's just call it what it is. That was a fight I was very excited for that did not live up to the hype whatsoever. It just feels like with Salikhov, it's the threat of what he's going to do more than what he's actually going to do. And yes, Fialho does leave himself very open for some of those counter shots. He could definitely be hit by them, like you said. He's been hit clean even in the fights where he's won and looked very good in. But I do still like him for his overall activity. And the last thing, too, is but a decade younger, too. That has to be brought up. Like, not that Fialho's some spring chicken by any means. He's definitely had some damage in his career, but Muslim Salikhov is not a young man at this stage of his life by any means.
Yeah, Salikhov coming off that loss to Li Jingliang. I mean, the only other loss on his career, he lost to Chris Holcomb in 2012 by submission and Alex Garcia by submission, a guy who trained out of Montreal, Quebec, Canada when he's in the UFC. The odds on this one, Salikhov's the favorite, minus 130. Fialho, plus 106 underdog. And the fan vote, 59% going with Fialho to get the win, 81% by knockout. For the 41% that have Salikhov, what is that, 68% by decision. I think Fialho wins by decision. He's the underdog, and that doesn't agree with the fans. But both of us going with Andre Fialho in this fight.
But I could see a stoppage either way, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I agree with you. I do favor Fialho, especially if it goes late. I like his output. I like his activity. But he definitely leaves himself open enough to where if Salikhov decides to become the fighter from a few years ago, he definitely has an opportunity to get the stoppage. But this should be an incredible fight for as long as it lasts.
Both of us going with Portugal the man. I feel it. Like, going with Andre Fialho to get the win. Some big-time fights on this card, including Waldo Cortes-Acosta taking on Chase Sherman. That one's up next. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.